Hey folks, welcome back to the channel, and in this video we're going to be talking about the m0NESY move. I know this is kind of old news now, and so I almost didn't even make this video because I was like, is this even really relevant anymore? We're already into IEM Melbourne. He's already having his debut event with Falcons. This topic's already been talked out a lot, but I figured I might as well at least try to put some content out on this channel, and this was one of the relevant topics floating out there. I'm also currently waiting on seeing what the fuck's going to happen with Furia, because there's obviously a lot of different things going on with that, and then I'll nail that video down coming up soon, probably, depending on when you're watching this. And then, of course, I got some events coming up as well that I'll probably talk about in a vlog or something like that, either before I go or after they're over or whatever the case may be. So I got some other things in the pipeline as well to try to keep this channel growing. So if you don't mind, if you're not already, please do subscribe to the channel, like the video, comment, help the algorithm, all that jazz. I am still trying to grow this channel, believe it or not, as I know that I haven't done as much content lately, but I've also been on the road a lot this year with different gigs and have some more gigs coming up, which will kind of keep me busy for a little bit. But when I get back from this next trip, I'll have a little bit more time to work on things. Obviously, the major will bring about a lot of opportunities to do content. So I think I'll definitely be able to get back into a little bit of a better flow of things. But let's talk about the m0NESY move, right? So, of course, the m0NESY move is that he obviously moved on from G2 and went over to Falcons. Now, this move was pretty much well known for a long time, almost even as long as we knew that Nico was going to Falcons. There was a brief lull where that seemed to kind of die down and people thought that maybe it actually wasn't going to happen because G2 just didn't want to sell. They wanted to try to hold on to m0NESY as long as possible, probably to try to get as much as they could out of him before he left. But you're playing a very dangerous game when his contract's going to run up at the end of the year, and the value on his buyout is going to keep going down and down and down as you run out of time to sell him. And obviously you don't want to let him go for free, so you got to sell him at some point. And then it comes down to, well, do you try to at least hold on to him for the major, try to get one more good major run out of him? Or in this situation where Falcons is ready to slap on the table the long dick money, that you just kind of have to take it because it is long dick money at the end of the day, and they want him before the major to have their best shot at the major, and it is what it is at that point, I guess you could say. Like, I don't really know how else to go with this. It is just one of those things, and I'm sure there were other organizations that were interested in m0NESY, but from what m0NESY said, this was really the main move for him that he wanted because he wanted to play with Nico and felt like the long term of Falcons is something that was very appealing to him. Working with m0NESY was appealing to him. You know, there was a lot of different things. And I'm sure the checkbook that got broken out and the money that he's getting is also probably pretty nice. Although I think at his age, with plenty of time to make money, it is one of those things where I think he probably is a little bit more focused on his career and winning and helping Nico win and that bond that he seems to have with Nico. And again, just believing in the long-term future of the project. But money is still pretty nice. Got to make it while you can, invest it, you know, set up your long-term future. And also, by the way, while I'm talking about this, I don't know why Falcons just keep finding a reason to talk about how they're not spending money. Just lean into it, man. Lean into the fact that you got the big wallet. It's so weird how they try to downplay their payroll and try to make it sound like they actually don't have the biggest payroll of anyone. But then we're obviously hearing the buyouts that you're paying. We know what players you're getting, what type of salaries those players demand, and you got those guys posting photos of them flying business class to Melbourne. So, dude, just like figure it out, like lean one direction. You know what I mean? Like, I think at this point, just gotta lean into the big money thing. I'm sorry. You know, it is what it is at that point. But either way, let's just kind of talk about this move from all angles now. So on the m0NESY front, look, is this the right move for his career? I definitely think it puts him in a better position than he was at in G2. Now, could there have been other places he could have gone where he might have had a better chance to win? That's an interesting one. You know, I don't really know the answer to that question. You know, obviously teams right now that are set up to win are a team like Vitality, where obviously he's not going to replace Ziwu, so I mean that's not really a thing. Obviously going to Spirit in place of Shiro could be interesting, because I think he is a more dynamic opera than Shiro is. I think he can do everything Shiro can do and more. I think his rifling is better than Shiro's. Like, I do think that he could indeed elevate the skill ceiling of that Spirit team, who are still a top 3 team in the world. But at the end of the day, I can also see it from Spirit's perspective, where they would rather just hold on to Shiro right now and not spend the money because they saved the money and not had to buy m0NESY, and Shiro is still a pretty good opera. I definitely think he has his limitations on the impact he can have because of how passive he is. but he still does do his job very well on the CT side in particular, and he still can be that passive dichotomy to Donk's aggression, which can kind of balance the team out. So I can kind of see it from that perspective as well. Obviously, with Mouse Sports, you know, they don't really have the money to fetch someone like that, I don't think, and I think they're already pretty well set up. And then after that, really the only other thing you can think of is, like, could he go to Navi and opt for them in place of Wonderful? Obviously, there's the whole geopolitical situation around that makes that seem impossible. I do know that he has a very good friendship with Bit. I do think he would probably relish in the ability to play underneath a coach like Blade. And I do think he would bring the necessary star power that Navi really do need, I think, to take the next step forward. So there are, like, some interesting things here and there. I'm sure FaZe would have loved to have him in the situation that they're in right now. You know, you got the legend, you know, Kerrigan as IGL, you got Elige as your sick entry rifler, you got Frozen as kind of your stable flex rifler. And if you had someone like m0NESY come to that team and be like a true star op for that squad, that would make FaZe very much appealing. But after that, I don't really see, like, any other ones. Like, I don't think, like, the Virtus Pro to Icy move makes sense for m0NESY. And then as you go down the line, like, Liquid for Ultimate, yeah, even with Shuhei there as their new IGL, there's still a lot of question marks there. So, I mean, yeah, you could kind of, like, theory craft some really cool moves that are out there. But when you do think about how Falcons are set up financially, long-term it does make sense, right? Because, first of all, I do think Kixon's a pretty solid IGL. I do think you can roll with him for a while and see what you can do with the core of Kixon, Nico, and m0NESY. I think that's a fantastic combination to work with. And, you know, I think Tessus and Magus are fine in their roles right now. I do think Magus has slowed down pretty drastically, which is a little bit damning. You know, I actually thought at first, like when this team first came together at the beginning of the year, I saw a couple like little high marks from Magus, and I thought, you know what, maybe this guy's still got it. Maybe this dude does still have a little bit of something in him. Like, obviously, he was kind of struggling on, you know, Falcons throughout, you know, last year and things of that nature. But again, when I saw him at Katowice and I saw him at Cluj-Napoca, like, I thought, maybe he could still be like a serviceable role player on this team. Maybe that's still fine. But I do think his drop-off since then has been pretty damning. So long term, that is probably a guy that is probably going to be on his way out. But there's so many types of players you could bring in for him that, you know, that they will find something out. And look, I do feel for Tessus. I really do. You know, it's one of those things where I don't feel like he is necessarily deserved to be removed from this team in the future. I thought he played really well in Bucharest, for example, the event that they just won. You know, I thought he did pretty well for them at Cluj as well, where they came second. He was obviously a really strong member of Heroic last year when they were making their run at the end of last year. You know, at top 4 at Rio, the major story where they made the playoffs over Navi. You know, some of these events kind of towards the end of the year, I thought he was a very strong player for Heroic when they brought that core over. But either way, like, any way you look at it, just think of it this way. Like, you have m0NESY, star opper, potentially the best opper in the world. There's obviously the debate to be had with ZywOo, although I do think ZywOo's biggest strength is his hybrid nature. His rifling is certainly way better than m0NESY's. His impact with an AK on the T side as like an entry, second entry is just like this crazy wild card factor that he has. When you talk about pure opping, though, it's tough to call between ZywOo and m0NESY. It really is. Like, I think you could probably argue in either direction. Right now, ZywOo seems to be like number 1 player in the world overall. But I could see you go either way with that one. Whatever. Let's say top 2 opera in the world. Okay, you got that. You got Nico, who is one of the most versatile rifles in the world and still one of the most consistent performers in the world. Again, I think Kixon is a pretty solid IGL as far as how he ran things at Heroic last year. He really showed me that he could put together a team that could do something. Obviously, there was some shakiness with Falcons at first, but it seems like it's getting better, and maybe it can get even better with more time. And so, again, I think that core is really nice of Nico, Kixon, and m0NESY. And then, yeah, you kind of just move from there. Like, you can eventually get a better anchor and extremity rifler than Magus down the road. I know that maybe the whole Jimmy thing has, you know, sailed. That was a move that could have happened if m0NESY would have gotten to Falcons sooner before Jimmy re-signed with Mouse, and that could have been very interesting. I do wonder if there was maybe an attempt to look at Bit, or if G2 maybe looked at him, or I don't know. Like, I know that there's like this Bit m0NESY connection. If that's a thing that could happen in the future, maybe that could be really cool. I don't really know. I'm just saying eventually you can upgrade that slot. And then with Tessus, you know, I'd hate to see it, especially if he can keep playing well, but you could eventually upgrade that slot. There's the whole Kaiosuke rumor. That would be interesting, though, because he is a pure rookie and you don't really know how he's going to perform at this level. So that could be a slight gamble. But it's like, who else are you going to get for like a aggressive rifling type of role? Like, you're not getting Flames, you're not getting Donk. So those are kind of gone. Like, I don't really know where you go from there at that point. I mean, Mouths would be cool, obviously. You just unite the three with a better IGL. And G2 was like a top 5 team last year, even with their discrepancies. So, like, that could be cool, maybe, I guess. But all in all, again, I do think Falcons is just, with their financial structure, with the moves they have already made, it is just one of those eventualities, if that's even a word, I think that is, that they can just eventually build a super team of talent, and this is a great core to go around. So I'll just kind of leave it at that. Like, I'm just kind of projecting forward, but you do just feel like they're eventually going to piece something together. As far as for Dexter, obviously this is a bummer. I do think that he played very well on this team, even despite the circumstances. The fact that he was potentially going to get cut from Heroic before they made the move to Falcons. Then they kept him because they needed the core to keep the spot. Then he was still on his way out because of the whole m0NESY thing. Like, to kind of know that is looming over your shoulder the entire time, yet you still perform as well as he did in big games against top opponents, I think that is something to be celebrated. I thought he was a fine opera for Heroic last year, considering the circumstances of him being away from the game for a year, having consistent visa issues, all the different things that he had kind of going on. Now, I know that his visa issues could be a looming concern where he goes next. Falcons obviously had the financial means to handle those situations. Although it even seemed like Heroic had him in a fine spot the second half of 2024. So even with less financial means, Heroic were able to figure that situation out. So let's just say the visa thing is not a problem. I mean, as far as where this guy could go, I don't know. I mean, it's really tough to say. Like, do FaZe take him over Brokey? I think maybe that's at least a consideration. It has to at least be thought about. Would FaZe probably look to aim higher? Probably. I do think G2 should have probably just traded for Dexter, by the way, instead of doing this whole Hades thing. Maybe they're not going to lock him down long term, but maybe that could have helped you a little bit in that deal. Like, if you're going to toss Dexter anyway and we're selling you m0NESY, maybe just go ahead and give us Dexter and we roll with him for the major. Like, I think that legitimately could have been a thought for G2 and probably should have been, other than instead of this Hades move that they're doing. Outside of that, like I've already mentioned, FaZe is like one. Obviously, for Icy and Virtus Pro could be a consideration, although Icy's not terrible. He is just extremely passive. He's almost as passive as Jame. He almost saves as much as Jame. I see a lot of inklings of Jame in him. I thought he'd be a more dynamic opper. He is at times, but that whole team is just weird, where sometimes they feel like they're a faster paced, more explosive and dynamic team than what they were underneath Jame's leadership. But then I see them sometimes retreat back into their old nature of being very passive and boring and almost losing to the clock every round. And it's just a really weird one. So I could see Virtus Pro, though, potentially as an option, I guess. I could see maybe Liquid as an option in the future if things don't work out with Ultimate underneath Shuhei, although I'm hoping Shuhei can help develop Ultimate. And Ultimate shows flashes of brilliance. He just struggles against top teams, and I don't know if he'll ever break that barrier or not. If he can, that'd be great, and then we don't have to worry about it. But outside of that, then I don't really know. Like, obviously the best bet for Dexter is being able to get on a team like FaZe or get on a team like G2, but I just don't know if that's really possible. And then at that point, your best bet is probably Virtus Pro, and if you can't get that, then honestly, I hate to say it, but like, the next thing that could happen for him is if Sun Pius does eventually get bought out from Heroic, you just go back to Heroic. I don't know. And then after that, it's probably Bet Boom. Playing with Boom at Exile and Magnojez for Zordy or something like that. Like, that's really the only thing else that comes to mind off the top of my head. And that's no shot at Zordy or Zorte or however you say his name. But I'm just struggling to think of anywhere else where Dexter fits, but I hope he finds something because he seems like a cool dude from what I've seen. I think he is a pretty good player. I think he deserves something, but we'll see where it goes. Where does G2 go from here, by the way? That's an interesting one. Obviously, the Hades thing's a stopgap move. You've lost 2 generational talents in m0NESY and Nico. They're in a hotbed of shit right now. And I'm going to tell you this, I also just don't believe in Snax long-term as an in-game leader. It's not that I'm just some Snax hater. I know, like, Mallory's been kind of labeled that, and I have to some degree as well because I've said similar things at the desk. But just please tell me why I'm not supposed to be. Like, sometimes they just look like garbage on their strat sometimes. Like, don't get me wrong, there are games they look fine. Like, they look dynamic, they look explosive, they look like they have some diversity in how they play. But then I see many games where they do get stuck on a one-note kind of game plan, and then it gets a little bit stubborn when it's not working, and they don't seem to adjust. I've also seen them sometimes fall apart in the mid-round, which is something that's supposed to be managed by your in-game leader. Not just alone. Obviously, other players are going to be second voices or whatever, and then you kind of manage it together. But again, I do see it. And I mean, look, if we're just going to run down, like if we go run down the top 10 of HLTV right now, Apex, definitely a better IGL than Snax. Chopper, I'd say better IGL than Snax. I know Chopper has his flaws too, but okay. Brolin, so far, yeah. Major, I know he sometimes has the knocks against him, but I'd still probably say he's better IGL than Snax. Alexa B, obviously better than Snax. Blitz, obviously better than Snax. Kerrigan, obviously better than Snax. Kixon, I think he's better than Snax. Electronic, okay, here's where you start, maybe starting to raise some questions. It's hard. I'm not just going to sit there and clearly say Electronic's better than Snax. But Maka, definitely better. What Gamer Legion's doing, definitely better. Shuhei, obviously, definitely better. JT, definitely better. The whole situation with Katie and Astralis, okay, fine. Maybe we have a little bit of a debate there. Have a similar debate, with Furia. Big Uzair, I think, is better IGL. I mean, I don't know. Like, we're starting to get to, like, the 20th best team in the world, and G2's supposed to be a top 5 team in the world. So I think maybe you see where I'm getting at here. Like, I think they could do better. And here's the thing. Hunter's already calling CT sides. Hunter's already calling pistols. He's already over 50% there. Just make him the IGL of the team. Probably makes him better. Definitely a better fragger. He's already doing a lot. I just think eventually that's probably the move that you make. If not, then why is G2 not going after Shuhei? Why is G2 not making these big grand moves to try to bring in a big IGL? You know what I mean? Like, it just seems very odd that an organization that's supposed to be as high as G2 is in the pecking order of CS, for whatever reason, is not out there making these proactive moves. They're losing talent rather than gaining it. And then to brag. To brag about how you could have kept Nico. What the fuck do you mean? Like, what does that even mean? That just sounds so terrible. That just means you're not doing a good enough job operating your team if you could have kept Nico and you don't want him. Like, what are you thinking? The answer is no, you couldn't have. Or maybe you could have until his contract ran out, then he was going to leave. And then you would have been screwed because you would have let him go on a free. So that's really what I draw from that as like the best case way you could like interpret that information that was out there. I don't know, man. So here's where I'm at with G2. Heavy God and Malbs are good players. Malbs still has some low learning and growing to do to be able to play a role like Nico played for them. As a pure entry rifler, he's already very good. He's already very good mechanically as a fragger. But when you put him in positions on T-sides, for example, where he is working solo and he has to make tough decisions in the mid-round, when to go for it, when not to, when to fall back, when to try to push the issue. Like, those are just things he has to learn with reps and time. And hopefully with the right guidance from a good IGL and coach. But, I just don't really believe in the leadership at G2, honestly. Just from what I've heard, what I've seen. Hell, even just think about like what m0NESY said in his interview with Banks after he left the team about how they had no structure, he felt like, in comparison to when he played under Hooksy and stuff like that. Like, a lot of the times we can't really tell what IGLs and coaches do because it's not as apparent as just like watching them play because you don't know who's calling when and where. It can be very difficult to judge because of that. And so you kind of have to rely on player testimony. And a lot of the times players are going to be kind of on the more friendly end. They're going to be a little bit more generous because they don't want to avoid drama and BS. And sometimes they'll even praise a coach or IGL, even when maybe it's not necessarily the most true thing. But we're not even getting that. You know what I mean? So it's just like, I don't know, man. Again, I think you're already halfway there with Hunter being the IGL of this team. So just let that happen. If you can't bring in a Shuhei or try to attract some like Kerrigan or like some, I don't know, like I know FaZe sometimes as an organization has their own like weird things about contracts and whatnot, which is why you saw Rops go, why you saw Twist go in the past, perhaps. Just not being proactive with that, letting people go on freeze, you know. So if you could somehow snap Kerrigan away from FaZe, that obviously would be great. There's obviously other options out there as well. I wouldn't even mind seeing like Maka or something like that, although he is an opper, so that'd be kind of weird. So probably not, but I don't know. I'm just kind of throwing stuff around, you know. But let's just say you can't do that. Okay, Hunter IGL, fine. Malbs and Heavy God, great riflers to have. Very flexible, great. But then it's about finding like a long-term, like high-end opper for the future. Again, I mentioned Dexter as a potential person. I'm not against that, but maybe that's not possible, or maybe they don't like that idea. Then after that, it becomes very difficult because a lot of the ones that you want, you're not going to get. And then you just lost m0NESY, who was like about the best you could ever hope for. So that's a really tricky one for me now. Like all of a sudden, I don't know what the hell you do at that point. Like I just don't know. Sun Pius obviously comes to mind. I guess is like an experienced one that I know can perform well, and that may be available to get, you know. But outside of him and then the potential of Dexter, like, I don't know. You're just kind of gambling on one of these up-and-coming names that people are talking about, like m0NESY and Grix, but m0NESY is apparently already going to Fury, or actually, that's already signed. That's already a done deal. Sun Pius obviously still has a ton of value, though, so I could certainly see that being a realistic person to look at in that regard. But after that, I just don't know. I just really don't know, honestly. Like, what could possibly happen for them? I mean, losing m0NESY is just such a huge miss. And again, you're not getting some of these other operas that you'd want, like a Torzy or something like that. That's just unrealistic. So I really do think Dexter actually might be a good shout, honestly. I really do. And then after that, yeah, Sun Pius probably a good shout. If you could somehow get the Vice, that'd be a good shout. Although, obviously, he brings the risk of his health and stuff like that and what that means long term. So I honestly don't know what they do there. That's a tough one. And then then it's just about bringing in another star rifler after that. It's just about trying to get another big name rifle to come into the team to, you know, make up for the loss of Nico and, you know, all that jazz. I know Malps kind of was trying to fulfill that role, and he can, but you still do need another strong rifling talent on this team. If Hunter becomes your IGL or something like that, for example, you still need that third piece next to Malbs and Heavy God. And yeah, sure, that maybe a star opera could be it, but you still need like one pretty solid rifle to kind of round things out on this team, I think. So when you pivot Hunter to IGL and you kick Snacks, then yeah, you have to kind of start looking at other riflers out there. And again, I'm not really sure what options are really even available, to be honest with you. You know, that just doesn't seem like there's, maybe you pick up Tessus if he does go from Falcons. Maybe that's an option somehow. I'm not really sure if that's feasible or not, but we can throw that one out there, I guess. If you try to go after one of Gamer Legion's players like a PR or something like that, but I just don't know how that would play out. And then after that, I just kind of really struggle to see who they could get or who makes sense. Like maybe there's some young upcomer out there that I'm just not thinking of at the moment, but that's kind of where that's at. And that's really it. You know, that's kind of talking all angles of this m0NESY move. Just figured I'd kind of give my 2 cents out there. I know this is a little bit less organized and a little bit more free-flowing than some of the other content I've done. But, you know, this was a topic that's already been out there for a while. It's already been kind of talked to death. But I just kind of want to throw a little bit of something out there. Keep some content rolling on the channel. Be on the lookout for more in the future. Like and subscribe as always. Appreciate you. Catch you next time.